Okay, so if you watched the first video on the channel regarding the Supra, I did say at the start of the video that we'd get into my future plans with the car, but in the video we didn't really get into it, so let's get into it now. Okay, so the future plans with this car. This is just going to be a generic list, so to speak, as in it's not definitely all happening. Some bits will definitely happen, some bits might not, and it might not happen in this order, but it'll give you an idea of what I'm thinking. And later on in this video we are going to be unboxing some spicy parts, which you'll find out later on, so make sure you stay tuned for that. One of the first things that I'm going to have to change are these coilovers though. So as you can see by the top mount, they are looking pretty crusty, to be fair. This car was imported into the UK in 2004, and my assumption is that they probably came over from Japan on this car, if I'm honest, so they're very old. When we lowered the car, because the previous owner raised it a touch, so I had to lower it again, this coilover on this side, you can't really see it, but it got absolutely mullered because it was seized to the ring, or to the shock, sorry, the ring was seized to the shock, and it got absolutely mullered, so they definitely need adjusting or changing. Okay, so once the coilovers are on the car, I'll probably move on to restoring the headlights, to be fair. This side's not as bad as the other side. I have already polished these up a couple of times because they were a lot worse, but as you can see, the chrome on the inside is starting to peel away, so ideally they need properly splitting and properly restoring, so that's probably next on the list. Once the headlights and the coilovers are dealt with, I think we should move on to the interior. So I'm really feeling a suede headliner. I think it would really bring the interior up to life a bit with this standard grey one that we currently have. The seats could do with upgrading because we're still on the standard seats. However, they are electric and I do like that about them, but I think some nice bucket seats would definitely set it off. Finally, on the interior, it needs some speakers. These are 30 years old, so as soon as you start turning the volume up, they just start breaking up. So we do already have a doubled in head unit set up in there with Apple CarPlay and everything, so the speakers would be like the finishing touches for that. And then once all that's done, I would think I'd be quite happy with the interior at that point. Once the speakers are done, just thinking aloud here, this probably won't happen for a long time, but the car at some point probably will need paint or wrapping or something along them lines. I mean, it does look presentable, or I think it does anyway in its current state, but it's just little things, like we've got some like paint cracks there, a bit here, like just minor imperfections that just let the car down a touch. Like overall it's not bad, it is 30 years old, but it could be brought back to life a little bit, if that makes sense. The final piece for this car is in this area here, and it's of course a turbo. I have started collecting parts for this, so like I said at the start, we are going to be unboxing some parts that I've already collected. I'm not 100% sure when this is going to happen, but it's definitely going to happen at some point. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel just so you never miss out on any updates. Let's start unboxing some parts. So one of the first parts I'm going to show you is in this box. Let's open it up and see what's inside. Okay, so just by looking at the wrapper at the side, some of you probably know what this is already, but let's open it up anyway. So as you can see from the side of the box, this is the intake manifold that we're going to be using on the car. Let's get it unwrapped and see what it looks like. In the box we have the fuel rail, the throttle body and the intake manifold. Let's get it out and see how it looks. In this bag we have the fitting kit, so all the rubber rings, the bolts for the fuel rail, the bolts for the throttle body and the bolts for the intake manifold. One reason I opted for an FMIC intake manifold is because a lot of people, when they're buying these sort of manifolds, the cheaper ones so to speak on eBay, a lot of people say you need to get the face resurfaced because it doesn't line up with the head properly, so because it's not 100% flat, it needs resurfacing. An FMIC manifold uses these rubber rings to seal it, which is one of the main reasons I bought it. So if you see on the intake manifold here, you can see where the rubber rings sit, and that will basically mean that even if this wasn't true 100% flat, the rubber rings would sort itself out basically, and it should seal anyway. So how much did I pay for this manifold? On eBay it says that the price is £598.29, so nearly £600. There is shipping on top of that of £32.44. It comes from Poland, so there is an import tax to pay on this as well. It's not just £600 plus shipping, there is an import tax. When I bought it, I paid £489, I think. It was the cheapest one, like when I'd seen it, it's the cheapest I've ever seen it for. It's always on sale at like £550 odd, like it's on there now for £550. But when I bought it, it was £489, which is why I bought it then, because it was the cheapest I've ever seen it. On what I paid, so the £489 plus the shipping, I paid £115 import tax on top of that. So in total it cost me around £630. But that comes, obviously, as you've seen, the intake manifold, it comes with a 90mm throttle body, as well as the fuel rail. All of it comes together in a kit. As you can see from it in the box, it definitely does look the part as well. So in the engine bay, as you can see, we're currently on the stock GE inlet manifold, so that goes over the top of the engine, then the air filters down there. This is pretty much like a GT setup, so the intake manifold will then come this side, and then you have the turbo that side. To fit this, so obviously this will bolt on the engine somewhere around there. So yeah, once it's fitted, it will look something like that. I've just put this foam pad there for now, just so that it holds itself up, so to speak, because it didn't want to hold itself up. I had to put a socket there just to help it balance as well. But yeah, so when fitting these, I believe the fuse box needs moving slightly. It doesn't need fully relocating, I think it just needs lifting up on the left hand side, just because it touches this bit of the manifold. Once the throttle body's on it, I think it's just like that bung on the end that that catches on it, so to speak. And the battery, not everyone relocates the battery. I think a lot of people out of the throttle body will then run like a very tight 90 degree and then run down there. I'm not really keen on doing that. I don't think it looks the best, to be fair. I think they look much nicer once the battery's put in the boot and then a nice clean 3.5-inch holes cut there and the boost pipe just goes through it. A lot of people are against that just because it means you're cutting your shell, but I think it looks so much neater once it's done properly. So now you've seen the inlet manifold, let's move on to the next box. Okay, so this box is definitely the most exciting. Let's open it up. As you can see, this is the turbo. Okay, so in here we have the turbo. I'm going to put it into that box just so that it's better than putting it on the gravel floor, because that's the intake manifold box. It serves all the polystyrene and everything with it. Let's get it out and we'll see how big it is. Okay, there we have it. That's the size of the turbo that's going on the Supra. As you can see, it is massive, to be fair, and it weighs a ton. Okay, so there we have the turbo mounted on the engine. It's just sat on the distributor at the minute, so you get the idea of the size. So this is a 6275G, and it probably is, people would probably say it's too big for the application if I'm honest, but one of the reasons for going for this size was purely for looks more than anything else. So the Civix runs a 3582 Gen 2, which on this car probably would have been perfect if I'm honest, but sat next to the engine I just think it would have looked lost. Like, it's just physically not big enough, so I opted for this. This is 6275 like I just said, and I think the way it's spec'd, because it's a drag turbo, so it's made for airflow, so it's made for being wide open throttle all the time, and basically so it doesn't clog up because of the airflow from the engine being wide open throttle the whole time. So I believe the way it's sized up is like a Precision. So a Precision, you'd go 62, 66 or 76, 75 or something. This is 62, 75. So quite a small front and a massive rear, purely for the exhaust gas like I just said. So a 62, 66 would have been fine effectively. So the front side is, yeah, it's equivalent to a 62, 66, essentially just laggier and looks bigger and looks better basically. So it's a G42 size, which is like equivalent to a G42 1200 for instance. It shouldn't be as laggy as a 42 1200 just because the front's not as big. I could be completely wrong and it could be just as laggy. I'm not 100% sure, to be fair. But yeah, let's move on to the next bit. Okay, just to give you a quick size comparison on the turbo sizing. This is the 6275 that's going on the Supra. This is a 3582 that's currently on the Civic. Both from Pulsar. But as you can see, the 3582 is quite a bit smaller than the 6275G. However, the compressor blades I would say they probably look bigger in this turbo than they do in this one, but that could just be that it looks like that because of how big this compressor housing is compared to this one. I'm not 100% sure, but that gives you an idea of the size. Let's get back to the video. This is the next piece, quite a simple piece to be fair. It's just a radiator, but it is a Koyo rad. I bought it second hand off a reputable dealer. It was from Extreme Performance in Leicester, so if you're into Supras, you probably have heard of them before, but yeah, that's where I bought the radiator from. The car already does have an aluminium rad on it, and it's also set with a twin fan setup, so it's not got the viscous anymore, but it's a random brand, Phoenix, I'm not really sure what that is, and it doesn't fit the best. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but yeah, I don't really need to say anything about them. It's not great. Whereas this is a proper Koyo rad for a Supra, and it will fit fine. So yeah, that's the next piece. The next piece is in here. I have already opened this, but let's get it out and show you what's inside. I don't know if you can see that under the bubble wrap, but let's take it out. So the next item unwrapped is this. It's a Link G4X. It is a Super Link, which means that it's just plug and play. Plugs into your OEM harness. The only problem is, because the car's an NA, you do need to buy an aftermarket case to put the ECU in. It doesn't fit in the NA case. Okay, so down here onto the next part, we have two 44mm tile wastegates and two blow-off valves. One of my friends is having one of the blow-off valves, so I was only going to run the one anyway. I was going to go twin gate because the turbos are T4 divided. I have since found out that these are fake though, so when I looked online, the code on the top was like the same as the fake one they were comparing it to, and the blow-off valves, like the lettering is not the best, so I believe they're fake, which means I'm inclined to sell these and run genuine ones, to be honest. Probably not tiles, I'll probably go turbo smart. I did want to run twin 45s, or twin 40s, sorry, not 45s, and looking at the car, I would obviously put the turbo there and then run both the wastegates here, so I just think it looks really cool. But after speaking with a mapper, he keeps telling me to go single 60 and not bother with twin. Let me know in the comment section what you think, if I should go twin gate, single gate, or whether I should just keep the 44s and go with them. Next thing that's already been purchased is the intercooler. This was bought second hand with the wastegates and the blow-off valves, so in total I paid, I think it was £550, and that was for both the blow-off valves, both the wastegates, and two intercoolers. And my friend agreed to, the reason I bought two intercoolers and two blow-off valves is because he agreed to have one of each for himself. So he paid me what I paid for them, so the intercoolers were £50 each, blow-off valves were £75 each. So he paid me £125 for one of the intercoolers and one of the blow-off valves, which means that it owes me £300 plus £50 for the intercooler, so £350 in total. The intercooler, again, I'm not 100% sure on whether to run or not. It's 2.5 inch sides, whereas my throttle body is 3.5 inch, and my turbo outlet is 3 inch. So my plan was to go 3 inch turbo side intercooler piping, and then 3.5 inch from the intercooler up to the inlet manifold. So whether I just get them chopped off and bigger ones put on, or whether I just buy a whole new intercooler, I'm not 100% sure yet. The next piece that's been purchased is in this tiny little box here. That's the fuel pump for the car. It's a Walbro 450. I purchased this from a friend of mine. He had an S14 with an RB25 in it, fully built, and the fuel pump started running out of fuel pressure at around 700 horsepower, so that should be fine for this build. Okay, so the most recent part that I've purchased for this hasn't actually arrived yet. It is a cylinder head. This is a non-VVTi, which means it has a distributor there. When it comes to boosting, these distributors are quite old technology nowadays, and there's just much better ways out there to get the proper readings that you need. That would be via a cam trigger and a crank trigger. So every other variation of a 2JZ came with that apart from this model. So there is kits out there to convert your non-VVTi NA to trigger kit and delete the distributor, and I very nearly did go down that road. However, a cheap GE VVTi head came up for sale, so I opted for that instead. That way everything's OE Toyota, and it just eliminates there being a chance of problems, so to speak. Because I'm fitting a VVTi head, it does mean we're going to have to change the oil pump and put a GT oil pump in it so it has the crank trigger down there. And because this is a non-VVTi block, it means I have to buy some little adapter that goes down this side of the engine so that it can run the VVTi. Because we've opted to go down the VVTi route, that means that spooling a massive turbo like this becomes a lot easier. When speaking to the mapper on back-to-back testing, he's said that a VVTi head will bring on the turbo around 1000 RPM faster compared to a non-VVTi. Because we are doing all of this, it does mean we have to change the head gasket as well. So this engine comes out of the factory with a 10:1 compression ratio, which is a bit too high for boost, unless you're in America where you get to run E85 and stuff like that. Over here, our fuel's just not as good, so we have to lower the compression to stop knock and detonation and everything. So the GTs come out of the factory of 8.5:1, and like I say, these are around 10:1. If you put a GT head gasket into one of these, I believe it lowers it to around a 9:1, something like that, which is a happy medium. So that's what we're going to have to do to this. When we're getting this far into the build, it does mean the engine's going to have to come out of the car, just because it will make life easier. The oil pump's down there, the sump has to come off to get the oil pump off. The sump also has to come off to get the return welded in it for the turbo, and obviously the head and everything has to go on the engine whilst it's out. There's a lot more parts that we still need to buy for this car. At this moment in time, I don't really plan on forging the engine. My plan is just to take the engine out, put the VVTi head on it, and run it with a stock GE non-VVTi bottom end. So the GE non-VVTi, the rods and the crank are identical to what's in the GTE. The pistons, I believe, are the same material, just slightly different deck height. So basically, you could argue the bottom end is as strong as a factory GTE. So I'm unsure. Let me know your thoughts below. As you can see, we have collected quite a lot of parts for this build so far, but there still is a lot of parts left to collect. We've still got to collect a coil unplug kit, the fuel injectors, the oil pump, the head gasket, the head studs, fuel pressure regulator, and there's a lot of miscellaneous stuff as well, like the oil pressure sensors, or all the sensors in the engine bay, throttle cables, possibly new wastegates. We'll decide on that later on. But like I said at the start of the video, I'm unsure of when this build will take place, but if you press this button here to subscribe to the channel, you'll never miss out on the next video. I'll catch you on the next one.